illustrious guest today in Zaki Shangi. We never thought that this could possibly be happening. I'm interviewing. I don't believe it. But our lives have run parallel over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
She has Colored Girls on Broadway, and we had The Wiz on
It was directly across the street.
Right, all at the same time. And that showed you what kind of time we grew up in. Where we introduced Broadway to real fantasy with the only and the first Black musicals of that kind of success. 5 Tony Awards, 5 years running Tony Awards for the Shonga and for Colored Girls, and Susanna Beverly for her performance as the Lady in Red, which I'm sure a lot of you have only heard of. What was so funny about our coming together today, because we are seeing a repeat of history that we lived through as young kids. We were the ones that were standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. That's the Maya Angelos, the Alice Walkers, you could just name all of the writers. Toni Morrison, Langston Hughes, James Baldwin, all of those. Sterling Brown, right. And I had the pleasure of growing up in DC and being at Howard University and experiencing all of those people who came through the drama department, who visited Owen Dotson at that particular time, who was head of the drama department. See, dancers don't just dance. Do you understand what I mean? They're probably the most resilient people in show business. So here we are with a theater, right, with books and so forth. She danced as well. So this piece that you created and you stopped the world with, because it shed a new light. It gave voice to the voiceless. It spoke of the unspoken, domestic violence, women, issues, things that happened to them, things that a lot of people didn't know. You gave voice to the voiceless at that particular time, no matter what shade she came into, the Lady in Brown. And I had also the privilege to direct the 25th anniversary production of Colored Girls at the American Place and also at Center Station Baltimore. So, has much changed?
Unfortunately, I don't think much has changed. I think that there's been a resurgence of violence against women that has to do with our demands for equal pay or equal work, for our demands that men take on more responsibilities in the home, for our demands just to be independent women. I think there's a huge resentment in the male community of women as you are today. And there's been an increase in rapes, there's been an increase in assault, there's an increase in domestic violence. All these things are worse now than they were when I first wrote about them.
Do you think they've kind of gone underground in a sense? Because, I mean, there's a resurgence. There was a resurgence. There's Helen Redding. She came out with a song, and everybody jumped on that bandwagon since she was so brave enough to do that for Colored Girls. Then white women, as soon as they burn their bra down there on 57th Street, our politics seemed to have gone out the window.
Yeah.
The civil rights movement all of a sudden took backseat to those issues. But here we are today,
Right,
and it's even more prevalent.
right.
So, do you think that with all of the freedoms that you have inspired, could you tell us a little bit about that, the pushback, so to speak, that you face, even from your audience when they came to see the play?
Oh, well, when the Color Girls first opened in California,
Yes.
we opened in women's bars and in poets' cafes, and we were received warmly. And there was no indication at all to me that there was anything hostile about my work. There wasn't, because the audience didn't respond that way. Then when we came back east, we were a multi-ethnic company in California. We were Black, Latin, and Asian, and Native American. And when we came back east and we tried to just do a Black and Latin one, that didn't go over so well with Mr. Pat. So then he made it all Black and English speaking. And that took on a whole other tone from what I had originally conceived. And then, I guess because of the way we discovered work, well, Willie was a new piece that I wrote once I got to New York. And I had written the love poems to a guy in California and sent them as a letter. They were a letter to somebody. The love poems, the No More Love poems.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up in the show. And they became the apex of the criticism that I received for being hard on men, for not liking men, for hating Black men, or
was that interpreted as your hate of Black men?
it had to be, because it wasn't true.
Right, I know, and especially from your gallivanting in Chester, and all those cities down there near Philadelphia.
Oh, yes.
And while you were listening to Oliver Lake,
Yes.
and all of being romanticized, and those first parties,
Yes.
and so forth. But you kind of coalesced all of that in No More Love poems.
Right.
About, what is it, leaving your socks on the floor, leaving the toilet seat back, doing, all the things that men, or just leaving me. So when you wrote that, when you theatricalized it, because I divided that up into all of those women resounding.
Right.
And so when you wrote that in that way, that you weren't going to put up with any more shit, so to speak, I heard that, a couple fights broke out in the audience even.
Well, we almost had a fist fight in Chicago. I got really scared in Chicago, and my lawyer, this is funny. For a little while, my lawyer was Richard Pryor's lawyer, David Franklin.
Right.
And for a very little while. But anyway, David got so worried about me that he wanted me to have bodyguards because the crowds would be so hostile towards me, or the men in the audience would be so hostile towards me. And their questions are not really their questions, they're harangues and rants.
And how did they go?
How did they go? Oh, Lord. One of them told me I was afflicted. One of them told me that I was a witch. They told me that I hadn't had any good dick.
Yeah, keep going, yeah.
They told me, what else? Oh, they called me a lesbian, as if that was a bad thing. And then they said that, couldn't keep a man, that I was gonna be manless for the rest of my life. And things like that. Just things like that, and generally nasty things.
So you were the embodiment of all their worst nightmares, in a sense.
Apparently.
So, do you feel that as you moved more further east, that the hostility grew
Yes,
with the urban environment and the industrial?
The hostility grew as we got to blacker and blacker places. Because California is not such a black place, Northern California.
Especially in the 60s.
It's Asian
70s,
and Latin, and there's some black people, but not a whole lot. Now there's even fewer of us. But it was a more mellifluous community. And as we got back here and got more English speaking and blacker and denser, my work began to bristle people. It began to upset them.
But don't you think that...
because I think women back east hadn't ever said anything out loud.
Yes, absolutely. That they had found their voice in you.
Because,
the women had found
right.
that because they rallied and they supported you.
Yes.
Because you embodied the truth for them. But I guess the men had never heard that. And I guess we could say that men were always in charge at one time. And so you had exercised a great deal of freedom and independence. So what is that? So at the end of all of that, was your play achieving exactly what you wanted it to? Were you inciting that kind of response simply because you expressed so much freedom?
Well, my desire originally for my work was to bond with women. Men had never occurred to me as an audience or a...
That's why they weren't in it.
A phenomenon or anything.
Right. Absolutely.
And so my focus and my commitment was to the liberation of women and the end of the patriarchy.
And so that, okay, and in a lot of cases, you find, and especially with that bunch that had lunch and found out that they were all going with the same man. Were you trying to, what were you trying to tell us that? Girls, let's stop fighting each other.
Yes. Yes, let's stop stealing from each other. Let's stop stealing men. Let's find something else to do with one another besides raid one another's beds.
And so maybe concentrate on other things like getting ahead.
Getting ahead, writing poems, writing journals, forming women's consciousness raising groups, running rape crisis centers, running a bakery, fixing a car, doing any number of things you could do besides concentrate on men.
So you, and the consequences of men.
And the consequences of men. What do you mean by that?
I mean, tubes, tables,
Whitewashed windows.
whitewashed windows,
Right.
steel,
Oh, illegal abortion.
Yes. All
They
of
had
it.
never heard
Yeah.
what illegal abortion was about.
Right.